Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today in our How to Choose a Contractor webinar, part of the Ask an Expert webinar series delivered to you by City of Toronto and Life Green Toronto program and Clean Air Partnership. I'm Tessie from Clean Air Partnership, and I will be your host today. Our guest speakers today are Caroline and Victor, and I'll introduce them shortly. But first, I wanted to let you know that today's webinar will go as follows. Very shortly, I'll provide a land acknowledgement and then a little bit about the webinar series. And after that, we'll hear from Caroline and Victor on in their presentations. We'll have designated time after their presentations to answer your questions. Please write them in the Q&A box so we can track. And some questions can be answered also in written format if we have a lot. I wanted to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are based in Toronto, but you may be located somewhere else where it's another territory. Please share in the chat from where you're joining us. A little bit about us. Clean Air Partnership is an environmental charity that works to transform cities into more sustainable, resilient, and vibrant communities where resources are used efficiently, the air is clean to breathe, and greenhouse gas emissions are minimized. We convene on networks, lead research and knowledge transfer, and catalyze transformative action. I will share a link to our website so you can take a look at your convenient time. Homes and buildings that use gas or fossil fuels for heating and hot water are the largest source of emissions in Toronto today. To address the climate emergency, we must switch our homes and buildings to cleaner energy sources and make them much more energy efficient. The City of Toronto offers a range of programs, including the Life Green Toronto program, as well as funding, supports to and other resources to support Toronto homeowners develop their own net zero pathways. And we will share a link to the Life Green program as well in the chat shortly. I would like to introduce you to the City of Toronto coordinator for this initiative, Abraham. Abraham is an experienced natural resources Canada registered energy advisor and quality assurance specialist, as well as a CHBA net zero energy advisor. Abraham is passionate about eradicating energy poverty, educating homeowners on energy efficiency upgrades in their homes, and providing clear, detailed retrofit scope of work for builders and renovators. Abraham is currently the senior energy consultant with the City of Toronto, providing expert advice on anything single-family residential home energy efficiency related for the City of Toronto homeowners. And now our guest speakers. Caroline Moss is an accomplished architect with over 25 years of experience guiding homeowners through the process of home renovations. She is one of Canada's first lead accredited architects, and holds certification in passive house and net zero, showcasing her ability to transform even the oldest homes into energy efficient marvels. As the co-founder of Homes to Zero and the Net Zero Architects Network, Caroline has dedicated her career to sustainable design. In her role as a principal architect at Moss Sun, a small firm located in the bustling Leslieville neighborhood of Toronto, Caroline leads a team of professionals who are passionate about assisting homeowners in creating beautiful homes that not only feel good to be in, but are also good to the earth. Thank you so much, Caroline, for being with us today. Our next guest speaker is Victor Hyman. Victor is the Executive Director of Climate Care, the largest cooperative of residential HVAC contractors in Canada. Before joining Climate Care in August 2020, he spent 9 years in various management roles with the leading national HVAC wholesale distributor and 5 years managing a Toronto area HVAC contractor. Victor is involved in a number of industry volunteer roles. He's a member of the Heating, Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Institute, Contractors Board, the CMPX Show Committee, a member of the HRAI Emerging Trends Committee, and was the chair of the HRA GTA chapter, the industry co-chair of the National Resource Canada's Market Transformation Roadmap Space Heating Expert Team, and he has been a guest contributor to Mechanical Business Magazine. Thank you so much, Victor, for being with us today. Before I pass it to our guest speakers, a very quick plug in for our upcoming events. On Wednesday, May 15, you can learn everything about heat pumps. Join us. We will share a link in the chat at the same time at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And on June 19th, we are going to get a view into the Solar Geo part of this great tool that is on Toronto website. Introduction to Solar Geo webinar will be on June 19th, also at the same time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll share a link to that as well. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it now to Carolyn.
Okay, thank you. So look good?
Yes, thank you. Take
Great.
it away.
All right, well, thanks so much for inviting me to be here today. I'm really excited to talk. This is a little overview about what I'm going to be speaking about. We've already done some introductions, a little bit about why we're here, how you can prepare for your project, what team do you need, how to choose your contractor, and implementing your project plan. And then, as you mentioned, Desi, we'll be doing some questions and answers. So again, this is really about how you choose your contractor and how you get your project set up for success. So as was mentioned, I've been around a long time. I've been doing this for about 25 years working with homeowners. And so hopefully some of that experience I can share with you today, and that can help you with your project. So why are we here? As you've mentioned, single-family homes are one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions in the city of Toronto. And 2040 is the goal for the city of Toronto to have all single-family homes near net zero. That's 500,000 homes in Toronto. That's 30,000 homes per year for the next 17 years. It's a big job, but sorry, I turned my phone off. There we go. And so to get there, we think every homeowner should have a net zero plan. And that's if you want to do something to combat climate change, you're going to want to have that plan. If you'd like to take advantage of rebates and incentives that are available now, soon those are going to be turning into mandates. So one day that carrot's going to turn into a stick. So we would like everyone to have a plan in place. And then there's often triggers that might spur you on to do something like if you need a new air conditioner or furnace, or if you're planning an interior renovation or exterior upgrades, or if you're planning to sell your home. They're always all good times to implement that net zero plan. So we've created this kind of 5 steps on your journey to net zero. The first one being find out where you're at right now. What is your home's current emissions? If your home uses gas, it's going to be too high. Most of the emissions are coming, as you've mentioned, the burning of fossil fuels in homes is the thing that's really contributing to climate change. So understanding your home's current emissions, and then this middle 3 apply to any kind of project, even if it's not an energy retrofit. You want to know what's the current condition of your home, create a renovation plan, implement that plan, and then again, if you're looking at emissions, you're going to want to monitor those after the fact. To see how those renovations are going. So, preparing for your project. First of all, how you prepare really does depend on what kind of project type you're looking at. Are you looking at building a new house, an addition, a renovation, or are you doing like different parts like a new heat pump or upgrading your windows, etc. No matter what kind of project you're looking at, you need to make a wish list. Like, what's important to you? Like, is it that you want to, make your house more comfortable by, replacing your windows? I had a client come to me and said, can you help me install solar panels? And I was like, well, how come? And he said, well, it's because I want to do something for the environment. So we looked at what the options were. And I said, well, you still have a gas furnace in your house. That's probably, if you want to have the biggest impact on the environment, let's look at the gas first. In the end, he did both. Replaced his gas furnace and put solar panels on, but really understanding what the motivations are. Not only just like, I want to do an addition that has, gives me an extra bedroom, but I'd like to, have a bright, like whatever's important to you, make a list of all the information you have about why you want to do this project. The next one is big, it's budget. Most often, homeowners are coming to us for some kind of pretty major project on their house, but they have no idea how much things cost. There's online, you could do some research to get some idea about what things cost. We offer something, a feasibility study that looks at, your wish list, what you had in mind for a budget, but somehow getting the budget and the wish list to match, and they usually don't to start, but getting that budget and wish list to match is really important. And then the next one is schedule. So what is there a schedule that's driving this project? Like, is there a baby coming in 9 months? Is your furnace going to die in a month? Well, you don't know usually if your furnace is going to die in a month, but is there something in your schedule? You're going to put your house up for sale, all these things that's going to, and that might impact what choices you make in your project. Are you open to phasing the project, like doing part of it now, but you want to plan to do part of it later? So for example, we do projects where they might be thinking about solar panels in the future. So we're going to run the conduit up to the roof so that it's already set up and you don't need to open up walls later to get that in. Rebates and financing, like we talked about, there's some still available. City of Toronto still has some really great programs. Hopefully federal programs are going to come back in some form, but looking at what's available and what requirements there are to access those rebates and financing. And then also gather any background information that you have, like surveys, floor plans. If you have an energy audit already, get all the information you have together, and that will set you up for your project. So what team do you need for your project? It really depends, again, on the type of project you're doing. But if you're doing a project that involves the exterior of your house, say you want to do an addition, a major renovation, anything that's going to impact the walls, the levels of insulation, etc., you're going to want an architect or a designer that's very experienced in building envelope to assist you. Then obviously, if you're doing, say you were just doing a heat pump, then you might need somebody, an HVAC designer, for example, that's going to be able to figure out accurately the loads on your house, how much energy your house uses now, or if you are planning insulation upgrades, how much it's going to need after those upgrades are made. So a heating designer is required for that sort of thing. Solar designers, if you're putting solar panels on your roof, you might also, if you're doing solar panels on your roof, need a structural component. Sometimes the solar installers will include that in their package. But if you're doing, if you're looking at getting rebates, of course, an energy advisor has to come in to do your pre-retrofit. And again, that has to be done before any work is done on your house. To access the City of Toronto rebates, you're going to need to get an energy advisor in right at the very start. And then at the end, once all the upgrades are done, you might look at financing. So you have to really look at what is the team that you need for your project. And the next kind of series of slides would deal with how you would choose any of those people. Additional project considerations are, do you need a building permit for your project? If you're just switching out windows, if you're just adding insulation, sometimes you don't need a building permit. But you have to be really clear and make sure you're asking those questions as you do your planning. Are there other regulations? So there's times when you might not need a building permit, but you still need to meet zoning. So zoning is a regulations like in the City of Toronto as to how high your building can be, how far it is from setbacks. So for example, a shed is, you don't need a building permit to build a small shed, but it does still need to meet the setbacks from the property line. Same thing for your heat pump location. So just something to keep in mind. And are you aiming for a certain certification like Passive House, Zero Low Carbon? Make sure that the person that you're looking at is familiar with these. So how do you find your team? Word of mouth is one of the best ways possible. Either your friends, your family. There's some, if you have a trusted Facebook group, they're actually amazing now, where they share people that they've used in the past and their experience with them. So word of mouth, I would say, is one of the best ways. And for us, the best projects that we get are through word of mouth from clients we've worked with in the past, etc. You can also do online research. This webinar, for example, other like online forums and that sort of thing. Obviously, there's web apps, flyers, and then again, professional networks. I've been doing this a long time. We have a really great network of contractors and other professionals that we work with. So we usually are gathering the team for our clients. And so really leveraging any of those options is the way to start gathering the options for your team. So how to choose that team? First of all, pre-qualify. So you've done all the research, you've got this big list of people. You can contact potential candidates and you really want to ask them about their experience. Are they experienced with the type of project that you're looking to do? Do they have any training? Like if you want a passive house, obviously the person's going to need to have passive house training. Are they available at the time that you're looking to do the work? Get that big list of potential candidates down to a short list of 3 or 4 that you're going to ask to quote. It says here to issue documents. So the documents that you want to give to the people quoting, it really depends, again, on the size of project. If we're doing an addition or a major renovation, we're going to give the candidates a scope of work. We're going to give them some drawings and a sample contract, for example. We're going to invite them to a site visit where they can meet the homeowner, have a look at the house to see what they're dealing with, and then they're going to provide some quotes. It usually takes about 2 weeks for those quotes. And just keep in mind that the better the information you give them, the better the quotes you're going to get. And that there's a lot of things that impact how much your project's going to cost. It's not just, for example, the quality of the heat pump that you're putting in. If we're doing an addition or renovation, what size that is, there's sort of a dollars per square foot we're looking at. And the bigger the project, that number usually comes down. Smaller projects cost more per square foot. How much intervention there is to have to do the work. So if you're just replacing a unit in place, that's one thing. But if you have to upgrade the ducts, etc., to accommodate the new heat pump, what quality the heat pump is, are there constraints in accessing your property? Downtown is very difficult, much more difficult to build in than other places where access isn't as difficult. Market conditions right now, things are a lot better than they were a couple years ago when it was really difficult to get a contractor. And then also there's contractors. There's certainly different levels of contractors and different levels of project management among them. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at who's quoting. And then once you've got your list down to that 1 or 2 top candidates, ask for references and call them. You can just start with your top person, call them, get some feedback, and have a list of questions. And if there's still 2, you could ask 2, but you don't need to ask for references from the whole group. And then in terms of contract types, there's a lot of different contract types for construction projects. The one we use most often is a fixed price contract. And it's sort of, you have to think of it like you're buying a car though, right? If you're going in to buy a car, you're going to pay a certain price for a certain list of, for an exact car. So it's got the certain package on it. There's no question about what kind of car you're getting. So in a fixed price, you have to be pretty clear on what you're asking for. There are some ways to get around that by putting allowances in for things, but for the most part, you want a pretty fixed project for a fixed price. There's also cost plus, so that's like the cost of the project plus a markup, or time and materials where you're paying for the time of the contractor and then the materials, and then construction management where you're getting all the invoices, like all the receipts for every cost that went into your project, and then you're paying somebody to manage it. And so you, in a sense, in that case, are the general contractor, but you're paying a manager to work the project on your behalf. So here's a list of questions that we put together that we always ask. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think one of the most important ones is the first, how long have you been in business, right? So what you want to make sure, if you're doing a project on your house that's going to be around for a long time, right, a renovation, you want to know that the company that you're working with has experience in this kind of project. They've been around for a while, and they're going to be around for a while after, in case there's any issues or fixes that have to happen. Again, this is a kind of big list of questions. Hopefully you can read through them quickly, but experience, like we've talked about. One of the things that I do want to mention is that if you have like a super contractor that has been recommended to you by like 5 of your best friends and they're available when you want them, there's nothing wrong with sole sourcing a project either if there's somebody that's just perfectly suited to you. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to get 3. And we do that sometimes if there's just, if there's a schedule constraint or, they just really want a certain person, then there's nothing wrong. Again, if there's any, like read through these, if you've got questions about any of them, how to ask them at the end. So during construction, always. Only thing like death, taxes, and changes during construction are the only guarantees in life. It always happens. And so you just need to have a process. The process that we use is a proposed change order. So say somebody comes in and they're like, oh, I wish that, I had asked for a heated floor in my bathroom. Then it's like, okay, we get a proposed change order. The contractor gives us a price for how much it's going to cost to add that heated floor in the bathroom. And then the customer looks at it and says, okay, yeah, that price is good, or, oh, that's a lot more than I was expecting. I'm not going to do it. And then it gets turned into a change order. So there's this like paperwork trail for every change. So you don't just go on site one day and say, oh, I wish I had a heated floor. And then you get a bill for a heated floor that you weren't expecting. So it's really important that you're clear with whoever you're working with what happens for changes. It's also nice to be familiar with the Construction Lien Act in terms of how holdbacks work. People have heard of holdbacks, I'm sure. There's a 10% holdback that happens on all of our invoices. And that's not about quality of work, holding it back to make sure the contractor finishes. That's to protect homeowners against a subcontractor leaning the project. So that could happen, for example, if you have a general contractor and they don't pay the framer for some reason, and then the framer could put a lien on your house. The holdbacks are there to protect you against that. So it's just something you want to be familiar with. Construction review is very important, that somebody is making sure that the whatever project is happening or whatever is being installed is being reviewed and in conformance with the documents that were submitted or what was in the contract. Payments. So usually some projects, some contractors ask for a deposit in advance, especially ones where it's sort of like windows, for example, where it's very material heavy, that they're going to have to obviously take a deposit so that they can build the windows for you and then they get installed at the end. But if you have, for example, a general contractor or a subcontractor who's asks for a very high deposit in relation, for example, to a reduction in price, then that's kind of a red flag that you might want to think twice about why that's happening. But, being really asking the question also in advance about how payments are going to be expected, when payments are made, is a really good thing so that everyone's clear. And then at project completion, making sure that the project's reviewed so that everyone is happy with the final result and that the payments are all in order. So again, we created, I've had the architecture firm for a very long time. About 2.5 years ago, we created Homes to Zero because we were doing these houses one by one. I'm like, we don't have time for this anymore. There's that 30,000 houses per year that have to get done. So we have a net zero assessment now, a net zero plan, so we can help homeowners get that plan that they can implement with their designers. We work with designers and contractors and homeowners directly to make net zero plans for homeowners. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for this presentation. Very informative. I love how you provided very practical advices and the steps to go through it. So thank you so much for that. Feel free to write, for everyone that is on the call, feel free to write your questions. I see a raised hand. Let me see how it's with timing. Okay, Grace, let's try that. It seems you want to ask your question verbally. Go ahead. Grace, you can unmute yourself. Or if it was an accident, then that's okay. We could just keep going. Grace? Maybe it was an accident, or if not, we could try once again after Victor's presentation. At this point, I don't see any questions. So I think we're going to go through Victor's presentation, and then after that, we're going to come back. Carolyn, you're going to stay with us, right? We're going to have a kind of like a discussion and some questions. So yeah, Victor, take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me out today, Desi and Abraham. And thank you, Caroline, for starting this off. I think we're going to see some redundancy in the message because I agree with absolutely everything that Carolyn said. So we'll start with that. I'm going to speak specifically about choosing your HVAC contractor. That's the business I'm in. As Desi said, I'm the executive director of Climate Care. We're a cooperative of residential HVAC contractors. And so the topic I was asked to talk about was, how do you choose your HVAC contractor? So picking your contractor is something that you should really take the time and effort to do, like you would pick a doctor. This is somebody that you're going to build a relationship with that hopefully will go on longer than just the day of the installation. We want you to have a healthy, comfortable, efficient, decarbonized home. And that's a journey that, initially is going to take a little bit of time to get you the right equipment, a couple of days, maybe a little bit longer to do the installation. And then there's going to be ongoing maintenance that's going to be necessary over the course of the lifetime of that equipment. So there's a few things you want to really be on the lookout right at the beginning. And the first is, are they specialists in the type of system that you're looking for? Heat pumps are the number one thing that people interested in decarbonizing are asking their HVAC contractors for. And in many cases, HVAC contractors may not be familiar with installing heat pumps. And the reason for that in the city of Toronto is that we have a natural gas supply that's pretty robust. And so for generations, we've been heating with natural gas. And that's what most HVAC contractors in Toronto are comfortable with. So yes, they've been doing air conditioners for a long time, but heat pumps are something that has been very popular outside of natural gas territory for the last 10 or 15 years. But in natural gas areas, we really want to be asking contractors, are you familiar with heat pumps? How long have you been doing them? How long have you been installing heat pumps? Is it only since greener homes started? We've seen a lot of that. With the rebates comes a rush in of people who say, I need to sell heat pumps now. Is that new for them, or have they been doing it for a while? Are there installers and technicians using the right tools for the job? That's not going to be something that's easy for you to know. You're not an expert. You're trusting your HVAC contractor to be the expert. So you might just want to ask them questions in general about, the tools that they're using to approach their HVAC installation. Tell me about them. Tell me what kind of tools your installers or technicians are using, and see if it trips them up, because we want, really, ideally, your HVAC contractor should be able to talk about the tools that they're using with a lot of confidence and explain why they're using the right tools to the job. And then also, as Carolyn said, asking for references from happy customers. This is very important. A HVAC contractor that is confident in the work they're doing should be able to send you not only to the testimonials on, if it's on Google or if it's on HomeStars, but the last person you did this kind of job for, can you give me their name? Would it be okay if I reached out to them? We want to really make sure that we're dealing with people that are not fly by night. Unfortunately, the HVAC industry, has a history of attracting people that give you a taillight warranty. The warranty is only as good until you can see their taillights down the street. So we want to make sure you're dealing with people that have been around for a while, are doing the work correctly, and are going to stand behind it. One thing that's really important, Carolyn mentioned this, is that you typically aren't planning to replace your HVAC system. It's buried in the basement or in the attic. It's not something that most people think about until it doesn't work. And so in planning this journey, I would really encourage you to go and take a look at your equipment and figure out how old is it. Now, if you've been getting it maintained every year, your HVAC contractor can probably tell you that pretty easily. But if it hasn't been looked at in a while, go and take a look. If it's a natural gas appliance, it should be a tag on the natural gas line that says, by the appliance, it says when it was installed. You might remember when you had it installed. If it's over 15 years old, now is an excellent time to be thinking about replacement. If it's between 10 and 15 years old, we should be, this is something that I'm going to need to do the next little while. And why do I say that? Say that because 80% of HVAC replacements happen in a very short window. In 9 weeks in the summer and a similar period of time in the winter, it gets cold, furnace doesn't work, and I've got to replace it. It's a emergency replacement. The same thing will happen in the summer. We're going to reach 19 degrees today in the city of Toronto. Next week, we're going to be into the low 20s. And all of a sudden, our phones are going to start to ring like crazy with people that discovered they went to flip the switch and they've discovered that their air conditioner is not working. You have now entered the worst time of year to replace your HVAC equipment because you don't have time to plan ahead. And what you're about to do is make a 15-year commitment. So I would really encourage you, while it's a little bit cool still, take the time, take a look at your equipment, understand how old it is, and don't make a 15-year bad decision because you haven't planned ahead. So to Carolyn's point, plan ahead now. All right. So I get asked this a lot, contractor size, how important is it? It doesn't really matter. What you want to make sure is that their after sales service is going to meet your needs. And so sometimes small contractors will struggle with it. If you've got a really good contractor who is, one or two people, a service person, a technician, an installer, maybe it's somebody who does both. They've got a helper. They may do a fantastic job and be able to service you like crazy, like a specialist. You just want to ask the question, what is your service level rate? If I'm going to call you after hours on the weekend, how quickly are you going to get back to me? Sometimes small contractors can do this really well, and sometimes big contractors struggle with this. So I would really encourage you to take a look and understand what does the after sales service look like. So the other thing is, how quickly can you get this install done? We joke in the HVAC business, there are two seasons: how soon and how much. How soon can you do this install because it's unbearably hot or cold in my house? How much is it going to cost? And those are, often two of the drivers when it gets really busy. Price starts to matter less, and how quickly you can get it done starts to matter more. And unfortunately, that may be not the right contractor to do the work for you. So again, planning ahead, understanding that contractor size may help alleviate some of those pinch points, but really understanding what does their after sales service look like. Okay, where are you going to find a contractor? And the QR code will, if you want to take a picture of that or follow that with your phone. This is from the TSSA, that's the Technical Safety Service Authority in Ontario. And the TSSA is the gas regulator. So if you've got a natural gas furnace or boiler in your house, TSSA is regulating the gas technician that is allowed to come and work on that, and also the servicing contractor company. So this is a piece of literature that was put out by the TSSA and HRAI, Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Institute, last year, really trying to drive home the message that safety first, especially when we're dealing with combustion appliances. It's very important to make sure that we're trusting our homes to qualified contractors. So what should we be looking for? Lowest price isn't always the best value. As I mentioned, often the lowest price may be met with somebody who just isn't qualified. Knowing how to price the job is important because you want to make sure they're going to be able to follow up on any kind of service related issues that come down and any kind of warranty requirements. So a few things, a checklist that should really, catch you, as you're going through. Number one, qualified contractor is not going to give you a price over the phone without assessing the job site. We get asked that all the time. When it gets really busy, it's very common to get a phone call from a homeowner asking, how much is a 2-ton heat pump? Well, that depends. I can't give you a price on the phone. We really have to look at your job and understand the nuances that are in your house. If somebody's willing to give you a price over the phone with sight unseen, that should already be a red flag. Not requesting a large cash advance prior to delivery of the equipment or materials to site. Generally speaking, the kind of work that we're doing in single family homes, the equipment is what we would call on the shelf. It's on the shelf kind of product. And so the contractor is going to either have that in their own warehouse, in their own stock, or they're going to get it from their wholesale distributor. In either case, that inventory has already been paid for. It's not like, as Carolyn said, not like windows that have to be manufactured for your specific job. So the deposit that they're taking should not be excessive. Now, if you're doing something that is not cookie cutter, that's going to be more custom, then obviously the deposit size is going to increase because they're going to have to order in specialty equipment for you. But if you're talking about going from a furnace and air conditioner to a heat pump or furnace and heat pump, again, the deposit should just reflect some of the cost to, encourage you to make sure you're going to go ahead, but it shouldn't be a massive cash advance. So keep that in mind. Readily provide a full business address, telephone number where the company can be reached. This seems kind of obvious, but I'll tell you, I had my neighbor got a knock on the door from somebody who wanted to replace his chimney, and he provided a business card. When I went and looked up this company and discovered they didn't exist. Well, unfortunately for my neighbor, there's still a pile of rubble in front of his house because this person did replace the chimney, dropped the stuff off, left the stuff and said, we'll come back and pick it up, and has never come back. So want to make sure you're going to be able to find that company again, full business address, telephone number, what is their reputation, check them out on the TSSA website, and you can use that link to do that, to find out that they're a registered fuel contractor, they actually exist. And like I said, they should be happy to provide names and addresses of customers that they've done work before. So you really want to get a gut check. If it doesn't feel right, then don't go. When in doubt, never hesitate to confirm the contractor's registration. So that's for the contracting company. That's ABC Heating Inc. And we also are going to want to look at them from, are they an HRAI registered contractor? Now, this is not obligatory. TSSA is obligatory in the province of Ontario. Being a member contractor for HRAI is not an obligation, but it's a nice to have. And so you can follow this link, and there are thousands of HVAC contractors across Canada that are members of HRAI. And if they're members of HRAI, then HRAI has done the work to do the due diligence to make sure they have WSIB, they've got licensed staff, excuse me, they're registered with TSSA, for example. So this is a nice step in the verification process. And again, you can look them up by the company name, and just to get that gut check, is this somebody who's legitimate? As I mentioned, gas contractors need to be registered with TSSA. You can follow this link to go to the TSSA registrar and make sure that the company is registered. This database isn't always fully up to date. So if you put in the name of the company and it doesn't come back with the name, there's a 1-800 number to call to just confirm, because sometimes they are slow in updating the database. So I would encourage you just to, if they're not on it, give TSSA a call and just double check, and they'll let you know. Okay, now that we've been talking about the contracting company, I'd like to talk now about the people actually doing the work. And for small contractors, well, as I mentioned, you've got the person who owns the company, is actually doing the work in your home. That's certainly one approach. You also have larger companies where you've got a business owner and they've hired mechanics to do the work on their behalf. You can check to make sure that those people are actually licensed to do the work. And in Ontario, you need to be a 313. 313 is the license if you're installing a heat pump. So there's two classifications of this. Either will do. 313A is commercial and includes the residential component, and 313D is residential. So that's the residential air conditioning or heat pump systems mechanic. And we can go on to the Skilled Trades Ontario website using that QR code, and we can put in their name and look them up. And so I've an example here of a fellow who works for us, Jason, and you can see that Jason is a 313D, sorry, he's a residential air conditioning systems mechanic, and he's got his CFQ, his certificate of qualifications, and you can see that it's active and when it expires. And you can see he's also a residential low-rise sheet metal installer, and he has that qualification as well. So I really encourage you, ask the contractor when you're buying that job, hey, who's going to be doing this install for me? I'd like to check them out in advance and get their name, plug it into the database, and make sure that you are dealing with somebody who is hiring licensed people. Again, a shortcut for that, if they're on the HRAI member locator, then HRAI has done the work to ensure that they are hiring licensed people to work in the homes. All right. Equipment size. Equipment size is very important. And again, Carolyn talked about having a heat loss calculation done, understanding what size equipment should be installed in your house based on its heat loss today or heat gain today, but also, are you planning on doing work? And this becomes an interesting challenge because we tend to find that most HVAC equipment is oversized, and being oversized is not good. It's not like, well, the heat loss in my house is 60,000 BTU, and I'm going to put in an 80,000 BTU furnace just to be safe. That does not work out well. And the reason for that is because if it's not sized correctly, it's going to cause all kinds of performance issues. So right sizing the equipment is very important to ensure the comfort, efficiency, and longevity of the equipment. So beware of contractors who fall short of doing a full calculation. A warning signs could include a calculation made over the phone. Oh, your house is built in 1975. This is the size furnace, air conditioner, heat pump that should be installed. That should be a massive red flag. Another is a very brief visit where they go down and look at the size of the equipment that's already in the house and say, oh, you've got an 80,000 BTU furnace. We're going to replace it with another 80,000 BTU furnace. Or, oh, you want to go to a heat pump? We'll put in an 80,000 BTU heat pump. And since you have a 3-ton air conditioner, we'll put in a 3-ton heat pump. That's not going to work out well. A good estimate takes a long time, upwards of an hour, sometimes more. We want them to do a heat loss calculation. We want them to also understand, what is the existing equipment, what is the ductwork capable of? And so when we move from fossil fuel burning equipment to heat pumps, we run into some design challenges. If you've got an older home or a house with a finished basement, that we're not going to be able to change the ductwork, then the ductwork becomes a limiting factor in the size of the heat pump we can install. So that's very important. And we want to make sure that the contractor understands the airflow issues, is measuring up your ductwork. If you don't see them take out a tape measure and measure up the ductwork, that should be a red flag again. So we want them to understand, what is the ductwork, how much air is the ductwork capable of moving, and then that will be one of the limiting factors in sizing the heat pump. Do not agree to simple rule of thumb calculations. All right. So if they say, well, your house is 2,000 square feet, we always put in X size of equipment in houses that are 2,000 square feet. Beware of that. Again, a heat loss calculation or heat gain calculation is very important in the purchase process. There is another way of doing this called the utility analysis, where they'll ask you for your gas bills, for example. They may say, okay, if you've got your gas bills for the last 2 years, give me that information. And we can use that to actually do a very good calculation based on the consumption of gas, or if you've got an electric system, consumption of electricity at peak times, and that will help us understand the heat loss of the house in sizing the equipment. So if I can only make one point, if there's only one point you take away from on this slide, from this presentation, it is that size is very important. and take the time to make sure it's sized correctly. Because, you know, the bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of the lowest price is forgotten. If you kind of try to cut the corner on these things and go for the lowest price, the fear we always have is, you know, you're making a 15 or 20 year investment into your HVAC system. And yes, you might save a little bit at the front end because you've gone with the lowest price, but if they're not able to service you effectively down the road, if they've installed equipment that's not sized correctly, but it was less expensive, you will unfortunately be regretting that for a long time. So take the time, understand, is the contractor qualified? Do they know how to size the equipment appropriately? And are they going to be with you for the long haul? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Victor, for this presentation. Again, both presentations are great because we provided really practical advices for homeowners. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, like we often say, related to like your last slide, Victor, that cheaper often becomes more expensive at the end. Great. So now opening for questions and discussions. I did share a link in the chat of what exactly it's net zero home, but maybe let's elaborate on that. I know we mentioned it so many times throughout the presentation, but let's confirm what's a net zero home. Victor, would you like to take the first question?
I'll pass that one to Carol, and I'll
Sure.
take the next one if it's okay.
Okay.
So we define a net zero home. We're looking at emissions. And so it's a home that produces zero greenhouse gases emissions. And that means you want to be energy efficient. You want to not be burning any fossil fuels in your home and be using renewable energy sources. That's where you want to get to. You might not get there all at once, but that's the ideal.
Right. I guess just to add is that it's around the 80% more efficient than a regular home. And this could be just the orientation of the home for the warmth or for kind of like this like passive heating that we are calling. Also the systems, obviously, whether inside HVAC systems or heat pumps, and also airtight. So it's more in the long term, it's kind of like more. What's the airtightness actually for?
Air tightness, so that's air leaking. Like you've heated, Victor's got you a beautiful like new heating system, right? It's coming along, but your house is leaky. That means all that heat that you've spent money to warm up is going to leak out of your house, and then it also might like leak into your house, and you're not sure where it's leaking through. And so air tightness is actually like one of the biggest sources of costs in your home, because again, you're just sending that money out through the walls. And so Abraham, I know, has done many a blower door test. And so that's when they come to the home, they put this red thing in the door, and then they're going to pressurize or depressurize your house to see how many times, how many air changes per hour. So air tightness is measured in ACH, air changes per hour. And so they see how much air is coming in and out or out of that house. New houses are hopefully around 3 air changes per hour now. Most of the, say, semi-detached houses in downtown Toronto are like 10 to 15 air changes per hour. We've had a detached house that was 21. A colleague of mine, her house was 31 air changes per hour. So that means that all that air that she's heated is just going out the walls, right? And so there's lots of places that air can leak around your windows, around your doors, all sorts of things. But the good thing is that it can be fixed with air leakage is actually can be one of the least costly things to fix to some measure, not to get it down like a net zero house. You're aiming at 1.5 air changes per hour. Right. Passive house, 0.6 air changes per hour.
And the way that you can change it is through isolation of the walls.
No.
Oh,
so there's a big difference between insulation and air leakage. Insulations stop. There's 4 control layers. I'm going to go geeky now, nerdy out. But there's 4 control layers in your house. The first one is you want to keep water off your house. So that's shed water. That's like Tyvek on the outside of your house, or a house wrap is your first thing you want to take care of. The second one is air leakage, and that has typically been that plastic vapor barrier, air vapor barrier that people put up on the inside, but inevitably it gets punctured with holes and it gets compromised and it's not taped properly. It's not continuous. An air barrier has to be like continuous, 100% attached the whole way around. And then the next, but that's very different than your thermal barrier, which is your insulation. And then the last one I just mentioned was a vapor barrier, which is if you've got humidity in your house, you don't want it getting into where that insulation is, so preventing. And so sometimes those things can be combined, your weather barrier and your air barrier, or your air barrier and your vapor barrier. And we've got a big blog on it on homestayzero.ca if you want to go read about control layers. But it's really interesting. People often confuse air barriers and insulation, but they're very different things.
I would just add, the V in HVAC is ventilation. And I get this asked a lot. If I air seal my house, how is the fresh air going to get in? And I would tell you that you don't want the fresh air that's going through your walls. That is not fresh anymore by the time that it's gone through your insulation and whatever else is in your walls. You want to bring in fresh air in a controlled way that you're able to filter and temper. And so we want to absolutely seal the house as well as possible. And in a retrofit, as Carolyn said, that's not particularly expensive. Doing that blower door test, going in with a thermal camera, the contractor is going to understand, where is air coming in, and it could be in places you don't readily see because you think, well, there's paint there, and there's a crack that you can't see, and it's coming in there. So they're going to caulk those edges around the windows, around the door frames, and make sure that it gets really tight. And then we're going to ideally ventilate. Now, if you've got a house with windows that open, okay, you can do that. If you suffer from allergies or you want to make sure that the expensive air that you've treated, and that's really the point here, is that you've spent a lot of money and energy to temper that air by either heating it or cooling it. We don't want it going out the walls. So we're going to use what we call an energy recovery ventilator, an ERV, or heat recovery ventilator, an HRV, and that is going to bring in fresh air and temper it so that we improve the efficiency. So we're going to control the amount of air that we allow to come into the house to keep moisture in check and carbon dioxide in check, for example.
Right. No, great. Thanks to both of you for elaborating on that. Next questions are 3-season air source heat pump good enough for the greater Hamilton, Toronto area, taking raising temperature in considerations? Yeah,
this is an amazing thing. So we have this, maybe because we live in Canada, we think it gets really cold in the GTHA. It doesn't get really cold here. So the design temperature for Toronto is minus 18 degrees Celsius. So the winter design temperature, that means that 99% of the time, it does not go below minus 18 degrees Celsius. And so when we do a heat loss calculation, we are going to design a heating system that is designed around that temperature in the winter. When we look at the cooling, we're going to look at how hot does it get in the summer. And it doesn't get as hot as people think. There's a lot of humidity in the Great Lakes area. But we're looking at a design temperature that's about 30 degrees Celsius. So we understand how hot does it get in the summer, how cold does it get in the winter, and then we're going to size the equipment for those needs. Modern cold climate air source heat pumps heat down to minus 18 degrees without a problem. Now, the challenge that we run into is that the amount of heat that the heat pump is able to transfer declines as it gets colder outside. Right? So the efficiency of the heat pump, its ability to move heat, is going to decline as it gets colder, as there's less heat in the air. But minus 20 has become kind of the new benchmark, minus 20 degrees Celsius. And many heat pumps on the market today, many cold climate air source heat pumps can produce 100% of their rated temperatures down to minus 18 or minus 20 degrees Celsius. The challenge that we run into is the heat pump capable of doing it, is the ductwork capable of moving enough air? And so that becomes one of the limiting factors. But if you're going through the process of tightening your house up, doing the air sealing, adding insulation, then people will be surprised to discover that their ductwork, once we've done those things, is big enough to accommodate the heat pump that we need to use to heat their home. You may need some auxiliary heat, and that auxiliary heat can be done two ways. One is to add resistance heaters to, if you're doing a pure electric system, we might add 5 or 10 kilowatts of what we call backup or auxiliary heat, not to heat the whole house on the coldest day of the year on its own, but in combination with the heat pump, this additional 5 or 10 kilowatts is going to give us the temperature rise that we need to heat the house on those coldest days. Also helps us avoid oversizing the heat pump in cooling, because we can run into different new and unique problems where we don't dehumidify well because we've oversized the heat pump, and it can't modulate down low enough in the summer. So there's a little bit here. You can tell you want a contractor who understands how to put these pieces together. And another thing that's become very popular is what we call a hybrid system. Hybrid system would have a natural gas furnace and a heat pump. And we're going to, again, we're going to size the natural gas furnace to pick up the entire heat loss because we can't run them both at the same time. But what many people discover is that when this is sized correctly, that natural gas furnace may fire for only 1 or 2 or 3 hours in the course of the year, or may not fire at all if we've done the work. So really encourage you. That's not a bad solution for those who are saying, you know what, I want to do this incrementally. As Carolyn said, I'm going to do, I know I've got an old furnace and air conditioner. I want to do this replacement today, but I want to decarbonize. I know I want to go deeper and do some other things. Going with a hybrid system that's sized properly allows you to, get that gas furnace. We're going to take care of that with a heat pump. And then as we do other building envelope upgrades, that furnace just will run lower and lower and lower until one day it's just not needed anymore except for the blower. So that's a great hybrid or transitionary technology.
Thanks so much, Victor, for that. We have a couple more minutes and we can take a few more questions. Let's take this one. How difficult is to add the energy recovery ventilator? And does it need to be
ducted? Yes. So this is one, I say this all the time. It really depends. Where, how large your house is, where are the openings? If we're putting in an HRV or an ERV, we're going to have to put 2 holes, generally speaking, 2 holes through the foundation of the house. We need to make sure that there aren't other things that are in the way there. So where is your furnace room? What's the orientation? Do we have room above grade to do a new penetration through the foundation? There are new HRVs that are becoming available that are actually just a per room HRV. It's a new technology, but generally speaking, that I don't want to give a price to it because I told you before, somebody who prices it over the phone.
It's like
the person you want to use. So we want a qualified contractor to come in. We want them to do a sizing. The sizing is based on the number of rooms in the house. That serves as a proxy for the number of people that are going to be in there. And we want to understand, how much air we're going to have to change. That'll drive the size of the HRV. And do we have the ability to install it based on the survey?
Right. Thanks so much for that.
I think the other question, part of that was, is it ducted? Does it have its own ducting, or is it part of the duct system?
Yeah, so there are different kinds of HRV systems. If you were doing a passive house, Carolyn mentioned at the beginning, or you're doing a net zero house from scratch, you might have a dedicated duct system for your ERV or HRV. Often that will be tied into the bathroom fans, for example. So instead of having bathroom fans, we would pull air from each of the bathrooms instead of installing the fan, which is great because it's super quiet, because the HRV is going to be in the basement. But in a house, when we're doing a retrofit, we're going to do what we call a simple system where we're ducting it, we're tying it into the existing ductwork. So we're going to put the supply and the return for the HRV typically into the return duct system of the house. And we're going to basically be taking some of the air out all the time, and then injecting fresh air, tempered air into that return. That's typically what we're doing in a retrofit application.
Right. Thanks for that. There are a few questions about the heat pumps, and I probably will invite Casper and Zoran and everyone that is interested to just join us in May 15, because we are going to talk about everything heat pump. For the last minute, kind of like a question, it's more like if you're starting, it's a new house and you're deciding to go with the net zero home, does it take longer than having just a regular kind kind of like business as usual house? Does it require more from the architect side, and like for all this like energy efficiency requirements? Does it take longer?
So new homes are going to be required to be net zero by 2030, but you can do them now. It's very easy. And so it's just as long as somebody's familiar with the levels of insulation that are required, puts a little thought into the orientation, like you were talking about, where windows are bigger, where windows are smaller. It's does not take any longer than how you would plan a typical house. And you might want to get some energy modeling done along the way, if separately, if your designer doesn't offer that service. But it's something, again, that we work with contractors and designers to help them on the net zero package part. Other energy advisors, some energy advisors do that as well, some don't. So if you were to find an energy advisor or somebody that provides the service, it's just really to get the levels of insulation at the right stage. And like I said, it's the extra cost is negligible. Really, it's less has less impact than what tub you choose for your bathroom, for example, or what kind of tiles you choose, or what kind of kitchen you choose. If that's a question, then getting the levels of insulation that you need is really not a big cost upgrade. But in planning, as long as the person that you're dealing with knows about net zero, no difference.
No difference, right? It is 1 o'clock and we're at the end of this workshop webinar. I don't want to take more of everyone's time. Thank you, Victor and Caroline, for joining us and for providing this incredible, so practical advices. Really, very very grateful for that. Thanks so much, Abraham, for being with us and organizing this as well. Thanks for everyone who joined us. Join us again for all the questions that you have on heat pumps on May 15, where we're gonna talk more about that. And enjoy the rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.